6, this is where understanding the binomial expansion is way more important than knowing how to FOIL. Because what you'll notice is the power on there is a 12. So in order to figure this out, you'd have to multiply that parentheses out 12 times to figure something out. In this particular example, we are looking for the given term in which you have ax10. That means that when you finish, the exponent of the x variable has to be 10. That's super important. From our patterns that we learned just a little while ago, I know that I have to have 3 different parentheses. 1, 2, 3. I also know that from all of our patterns, the top number in the first parentheses will be 12, because that is the exponent in the original parentheses. I also know that the thing in the second parentheses is going to be x squared. If you can't answer the questions I'm asking you, you weren't listening very well to all the things I talked about in the patterns. The thing in the last parentheses is going to be 3. Now these are things that you should be able to write down with not even reading the question. 3 parentheses, what goes on the top, what goes in the second parentheses, and what goes in the third. This has nothing to do with what they specifically asked you. Next, knowing that my exponent that I'm looking for is a 10.
7.
And knowing that my x currently has a 2. That means that the exponent on this parenthesis has to be a 5. Because x squared multiplied by itself 5 times would give me x to the 10th power. Knowing that that thing is a 5 tells me automatically what the exponent on the last parentheses has to be. It has to be a 7. Because those two numbers, the 5 and the 7, have to add up to 12. And if you paid attention to the pattern and you look back to the previous example, you will notice that the bottom number under the 12 is always exactly the same as the third parentheses exponent. Take a look. Okay, so in the first parentheses, 12C7 is, thank you, 792. X squared to the 5th power was x10. And Alexis, did you get the 37?
2,187.
2,187. Okay, so I wrote all those things down, and now when I multiply those two numbers together, 792 and 2187, it produces a really large number, I'm sure.
$1,732,104.
How much?
1,732,104.
104. X to the 10th power. And so it said, find the coefficient A. Did I write down the correct answer?
Yes.
No, I did not. The answer is 1,732,104. On your test, I guarantee you there's going to be somebody in here who does not read the directions and writes down the orange stuff instead of just the pink. Pay attention to what the directions are telling you to do. Okay, you should be done by now. That's a few minutes. So I know that, number 1, there are always 3 parentheses. I know that in the first parentheses, the numerator, or the top, I should say, not the numerator, is always an exponent on the parentheses, so that's 10. The second thing is always the first term of the parentheses, and the last thing is always the last term of the parentheses. So those are the 3 things that I know. I notice that in the thing that they're talking about, that I have an x squared and a y 8. So when I see that, I know that in my last parentheses, if it says y to the 1st power, but I actually want y8, that last parentheses has to have an exponent of 8. Which means that I know that my 8 is also on the bottom of my first parentheses. And left over for the middle parentheses, I need a 2, because the 8 and 2 have to add up to 10. And then the rest is just about finishing off what I know I need to do. So then 10 choose 8 in the very first parentheses is going to be 45. In the second parentheses, 4 squared is 16, and then I have x being squared. And in the last parentheses, I have negative y to the 8th power, so an even number of things means it's going to be positive, so I have y to the 8th. Were they asking for the a or the term? If you read the directions for number 6, find the coefficient a of the given term,
45.
where you have a x squared y8. So they're looking for the a again. That means I really only need to take the 16 times the 45 to find the coefficient, because coefficient means the constant or the number that's in front. When I multiply those out and find that coefficient, I find out that I get 720. So you don't need the x squared y8 because they were asking for the coefficient. In number 7 and 8, this is a little bit different because they're not asking for the coefficient, they're asking for the whole term. Process is exactly the same, really, as we had in the previous two examples, or the previous example with 2 parts, but you want the whole thing this time. So when they say find the 5th term, and I see this 5th term thing, I know again that I start with 3 parentheses. 1, 2, 3. I know that in the middle parentheses, it's an x. I know in the last one, it's minus 2y. I know the top number is 12. Now, here's a really important thing to understand. When they say 5th term, I want you to go back and I want you to look at this specific thing here. So I'm looking for the 5th term. I want to show you something. I go back a couple examples, and let's look at number 4. Everybody see number 4? Look up here. Skip your packet. The first term has the last parentheses with a 0. It was the first term. The second term had the last parentheses with a 1. The third term had a 2. The fourth term had a 3. Every term that you're looking for has the last parentheses with an exponent that is 1 less. That means that I know that since I want the 5th term, my last parentheses will have an exponent of 4, which is also the lower number in the first parentheses. And since the last parentheses and the middle parentheses have to add up to the exponent, I know that this power in the middle has to be 8. And now the rest of my work is elementary. I just do the different pieces that I know. So that first parentheses, when I do 12C4, that gives me 495. X to the 8th power is x8. And negative 2 to the 4th is positive 16. And then I have y to the 4th. I'm going to multiply all of these out, of course, and get my final answer. So 495 times 16 is 7,920. And then I have x to the 8th, y to the 4th. And that's my final answer. In our last example, I noticed that I want to find the 3rd term. And so I have 3 parentheses. Again, the top number of the first one is the exponent in our original parentheses. The middle parentheses contains a 5x. Our last parentheses contains a 4y. And since I am looking for the 3rd term, I know that's telling me that my last exponent has to be a 2, which also is the bottom number of the first parentheses. And left over for the exponent of the middle parentheses has to be a 3, because the 3 and the 2 have to add up to the exponent of the original parentheses. And now I just expand what I see. So 5 choose 2 is 10. 5 to the 3rd power is 125. I have x cubed. In the last parentheses, 4 squared is 16. And I have y squared. And for my final answer, all I have to do is multiply that all out. I know that I'll end up with an x cubed y squared. And then I need to multiply 10 times 25, or sorry, times 125 times 16. And hopefully we all got the same thing. I get 20,000.
Yes, sir.
So the final answer is 20,000 x cubed y squared. Big idea. The first parentheses that we're doing in all these patterns is Pascal's triangle, the coefficients that are produced in a binomial expansion.